r/AskReddit. 911 dispatchers of Reddit, what is a seemingly dumb call you got which turned out to be serious? Not dumb, but it was a seemingly minor, by the way it was portrayed to me. An elderly woman called her doctor, standard GP at her local clinic, and said her husband had accidentally shot himself and needed to let them know. The GP calls emergency and lets us know as they thought it sounded minor, but police needed to be aware due to the gun aspect. Turns out I call her, she sounds very surprised. Police were calling her and says in her old lady voice, "Oh, you know, Hess, a silly old man, Hess shot himself in the garage." I ask where he is injured and she says Hess shot himself in the face, completely calm and serious. He had blown half his jaw off whilst sitting in the chair in the garage and was bleeding profusely. I think he wouldn't have survived, but I'm unsure. I'll never forget her saying silly insert name here, "What have you done to yourself?" in a sweet, calm, caring old lady voice. It's very interesting as a dispatcher to be exposed to how people react when they are in shock. Edit. Another one was I thought a crazy lady. It was a full moon night and very common to have mentally ill people call about weird things, called talking about her son leaking in her living room and something knocking around her house, very odd. Turns out after I did some searching in the system, her son was murdered a week earlier and lying in state in her living room. He had not been embalmed properly and was leaking black fluid on the floor. The undertaker was knocking at the door trying to be let in to fix the problem. Man, to piggyback off the old people thing. Had an older female call in saying her husband fell while in the basement. Pretty normal call, and I was trying to get info before turning it over to fire EMS dispatch. Said she heard him fall with a loud bang. So I asked a few more questions because she was so lackadaisical about explaining this. I asked her if she could see him, she said no, he was bedridden. So I typed it up as an unknown complaint, but with details of a possible fall, and asked about any possible weapons before I turned her over to fire. I muted myself and stayed on the call listening to her explain what she had heard. Before she hung up, I unmuted myself and asked fire to stay on the line so I could talk to them. Told them it didn't feel right, so I wrote up a run for us to go also. We have enough officers that we generally get there before fire, so the popo get there. Old Grandpa Jameson had killed himself in the basement. She was totally oblivious, or didn't want to admit what she heard, as for what happened. On another note, had an 89-year-old vet call in. Gave his address and said he was going to kill himself with a gun now and hung up. I was fresh new all by myself at this point. Like on my own for a whole 3 days. So I was typing while talking, and when he hung up I called him right back. He answered the phone and I tried to talk to him, but he stopped me. Explained that he was a disabled vet, he was all alone. His wife and kid had passed away already and he was tired. Mind you, the run was already sent up and the boys were on the way. He appreciated that I was trying to stop him, but it was his time. Told me the front door was unlocked and he would be dead by the time anyone reached him. He was right. He shot himself right after those last words. I feel some type of way sometimes. I am a vet too, and there are very few people that I share feelings with or anything. And most times I feel incredibly alone. I only stayed on 911 for about a year, trying to find some way to give back, thinking that I could hide myself by somehow being there for someone else. I tried not to, but I connected to every caller in some way emotionally. You just can't do that. It'll wreck you. I really think that dealing with that as such a baby 911 operator at the beginning was no good for what I thought would be my career. My hat is off to those that still do this. Maybe I am a pussy, but I walked away after a year. Sometimes I really regret that. For reference, I am in a fairly large city, so there was always some sort of interesting things going on every day. Not a dispatcher, was USAF security forces a long time ago. Call was a kid home alone, about a monster in the closet. Which was a bit weird, because the kid seemed a bit old for that. Holy fark, there's a snake in the closet that's gotta be at least 150 pounds. Promptly close closet door. Nope, right the fark on out of that, kid in hand. Called animal control. Called parent. Parent arrives first, indicates they don't even own a snake, let alone a people-sized snake. All parties agree monster in closet was accurate enough description of event. TLDR, monster in closet turned out to be real. Not the same, but when my little brother was about 5 he was freaking out about a monator under his bed. The parents were useless lazy idiots and refused to go up despite him being obviously terrified, so I went up. I am 9 years older than him, and sure enough there was banging and noises coming from under his bed. He had a captain's bed, hollow underneath with 2 drawers but otherwise completely closed, and a huge June bug had managed to get under it and was making a ton of noise trying to find a way out. This happened again a month later with the cat. Not dispatcher but paramedic. Got called to a woman who told emergency she had hurt her knee, literally what it said on our dispatch screen. This woman had been a serial caller for all sorts of trivial, non-emergency complaints in the past. The local ambulance area manager had been to talk to her about appropriate use of ambulance resources, but nonetheless we didn't think much of it. Arrived and her right leg was nearly twice the size of her left leg. Her kneecap wasn't even visible, although some light palpation seemed to indicate it was about 15 centimeters further around her leg than it should have been. Turns out the previous afternoon she had hurt it when she had fallen about 2 meters off a ladder whilst fixing a gutter. Didn't think to tell dispatch this, but wasn't sure if it was bad enough to call the ambulance or go to hospital. She also thought maybe she lost consciousness for a few minutes but wasn't sure. Her leg was so unbelievably swollen and unbendable there was no way she was going to be able to get it into a car, let alone how she would have driven herself with a dislocated knee as she lived alone and had limited support, so we reassured her it was a good use of our resources and encouraged her in the future to call the medical advice line after future injuries if she wasn't sure whether to call the ambulance. I have so many like that. Woman who called because she had fallen. Yeah, she had fallen and torn a chunk out of her leg and now there was a pile of congealed blood on the floor. Or the nursing home worker who came outside when we were clearing out from a previous call and asked us to check on someone who was having difficulty breathing. I mean, I guess they weren't wrong but I think the lack of a pulse was way more of a problem. In terms of funny ones, I did once get a call for hiccups. Thought it would be total BS but was quite interested when we could hear the hiccups from the stairwell, so through 2 doors and down a hall from the patient. Super violent hiccups and the patient had a pretty good sense of humor about it so it was a pretty fun call in the end. Really late to the party but it's worth telling. My center took a call from a number like 5 times in an hour, always radio silence on the other end. On the 6th call we finally heard enough of a voice to know someone was there and got an address and enough to know it was serious. Make entry to the house and find the caller. A man had picked up his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend to talk. He then duct-taped her mouth and zip-tied her wrists and ankles and spent the next 14 hours beating her with a bat, raping her, used a blowtorch to give her second-degree burns all over her legs and genitals, and broke her cheekbone. It was an absolutely terrifying moment and what made it worse was on review of the tape we could hear her say help on one of the previous calls, but couldn't hear it on the initial call-in. So this might fit in here. Sorta, kinda, I lived in Germany. Military firefighter/dispatcher, one time I got a call from the post office saying that their scanners were going off and they had found something suspicious. It's pretty late. It's about 2 in the morning. Cold, snowy. I contacted one of our chiefs and dispatched him to go check it out. We got frequent calls like that. It's usually malfunctioning sensors. As I was told. CH2 did their usual checks. As he was getting to his final check he examined the X-ray photo. Then about 30 minutes go by since I checked him out of the station and casually over the net. CH2 says, "Yeah dispatch, I'm an idiot, we have a grenade at the post office." My peanuts rise into my stomach. I end up calling hazmat teams, EMS, EID, SF, M, more fire units. They cordoned off everything. It was the biggest shit show to scrabble and get everyone that late at night. Once all units were here it took about 2 hours to find the man who the package belonged to. EID also pulled the package into their little safe box thingy so that if it goes off they can contain its blast. The IC and other command sections finally asked the man to come up and explain his side. From what I was told he was a newer military member and this next shit is too fucking crazy to not make up. This dude gets escorted by EID and is like, "Yay, that's my package, what's up?" They explain there's a grenade in it and if someone wants to hurt him etc etc. He says no, nobody wants to hurt me. Apparently he was pretty short about the questions. Then without missing a fucking beat he reaches into the box, grabs the fucking thing like Kanye handles his MacBooks and says, "No, it's just my paperweight I bought. It's a replica. Not real. I swear you've never seen so many people wanted to kill a man for the time he wasted." I laughed because it made my night shift go by quick. Got a call for debris in the road on the main highway heading into town. It was outside our town limits, but was passed on to us as it was pretty close, and the sheriff's department was going to take a while to get to it. We often took small calls like this as a courtesy to their department. Once the officer arrived, he discovered the debris was what was left of a motorcyclist in a hide and run. The body was in pretty bad shape, most likely hit by a semi, and had been subsequently run over by other motorists not realizing what it was. It gets pretty dark out in the desert, and the body looked more like someone had dropped some old clothes off the back of their truck or something. We had to track down the lady who made the original call. As it turned out, she was in the local convenience store. We discovered one of his arms had flipped up and become lodged in the grill of her car as she ran over it. Along with dealing with the original call, we had to call an ambulance as the lady panicked and went into shock when she saw the arm. Ended up being a long night. After the initial investigation phase, the whole thing was turned over to the sheriff's department. I never did hear if they caught the guy who hit him.
I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.